Hello, everyone. 1 second. It's that time of year again, where we can all, I don't know, be happy with ourselves and such. So we've got a bonus podcast today, and I'm joined by Santa.
Ho, 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 hello.
I'm also joined by Deck the Halls Tater.
Hello.
And of course, we're joined by our special guest, Dry Hark the Angels.
Season's greetings.
I'm proud of some of the Crimbo names I've come up with. I think one of my favourites is All Avant for Christmas. That was my favourite one. But so we're here today because Dryhad won the last one of the last competitions where people entered their run log and have a chance to get it evaluated by, well, us at us, I guess. So, I guess we'll dive straight in. The link for the spreadsheet is in the podcast chat, and make sure has everyone got that up?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, so right. And it should be up on stream as well now. So I guess, Dryhad, first of all, maybe walk us through what do you hope to achieve from this session, and what are your actual hardcore goals?
Right, sure. Okay, so you've given me this trusted advice role on the Discord, and I wonder if maybe you're reconsidering that, having seen the state of my run. No, look. Basically, I think that my style of play is very ad hoc at the moment. That I have a lot of technical knowledge about how the game works, but I don't typically apply it in a consistent way because I just jump into a run and just do what I think is a good idea at the time, and then halfway through I'll say I should have been doing something else, and then so I go back and do that, and that's how a typical run works for me. And honestly, I'm kind of fine with that, but I would like to be able to, shave a day if that's possible, to be as good as I can be without going too deep on the planning and the preparation side of things, because that's just not the way that I want to be playing. I'm happy to do that kind of thing if I'm aiming for a commendation or something, but for just a regular standard run, I'm not looking to leaderboard. I'm just looking to go quickly.
So, would you say you'd like to be able to do 2-day runs without having a huge spreadsheet open while you're doing them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible. At the same time, I do believe that you have to keep in some things in mind, like the big ones, like what you're going to wish for and what you're going to digitize, which are some of the biggest time savers in the game right now.
Also the ones most easily defining a run plan.
Yeah, I was going to say...
If you've set up in advance that you're going to wish for this and then digitize that and do this digitize earlier and then digitize at the end, then for me that already gives me a pretty good idea of what I should be prioritizing at what point in the run, for example.
So I guess what we want to take away from this is how can you comfortably manage 2 days without having to spend all day on a run like I do, and B not have to have a spreadsheet planning what you're going to have for breakfast that morning or something like that, which I think is fair enough, and I imagine that's how a lot of people like to play, and that's a good way to play if that's how you enjoy. So
yeah, well, ideally, my goal here is to internalize good habits, and whether that actually manages to shave a day at the end of the day, Yes, I didn't want to reuse the word, but yes, whether or not that actually does manage to shave a day or not, yeah, if I can, get into the habit of digitizing the right things, of wishing for the right things, of eating and drinking the right things at the right times, I think that'll improve my run. Even if it's just a marginal amount.
Excellent. So, would you say that this run is a fairly typical sort of run for you?
Yes, in that it's fairly emblematic of that playstyle I was just outlining. So not every run is going to look exactly like this, but it's going to be fairly typical in that it's, like I said, ad hoc. I do things because they come up in guide, or because I just have gotten into the habit of doing things at this point in the run. And if I have made a mistake at that point and I realize that, I will backtrack and try to fix it as best I can at the moment, but without having a premeditated plan for sequencing or so forth.
Before we go into some more details, just to confirm, you do have most of the toys, if not all the toys, and most, if not all, the skills.
Yes, I have now. When I did this run, I would have had all of the standard legal skills except a handful of like hobo spells or something, and I now have those as well. If those would ever make a difference, I have all of the standard legal shinies, I believe. I haven't yet gotten the Boxing Daycare, but I'm going to get that pretty soon when I finish this current run. So I have all the things to play with, and I think that's probably goes a long way to putting me in the position that I am, where I can just do these ad hoc runs and comfortably make 3 days, because I've just got the tools at my disposal to easily do that kind of thing.
And alarmingly, you don't have Request Sandwich, I believe you were saying yesterday.
Yes, that's right. It doesn't count. I've still got. I think I've got 4 or 5 more Boris runs to do, and I'll do those when I feel like it. I hope to do a couple in January, but yeah, we'll see.
I've yet to do Boris. I think I was saying to you yesterday, I don't think that path has aged quite well. Yeah.
I just remember the annoying thing is when Floundry came out.
Yeah, you can't use any
weapons
other than
right?
Trusty, or any offhands, because Trusty is two-handed. So he cuts out a lot of things there, but he cuts out a lot of other stuff as well.
Trust him to do that. Anyway, so where are you finding yourself on a typical? I don't know whether we should talk about day. I mean, it makes sense to talk about day 1 first, but so where are you ending up on a day 1, for example, and where are you ending up on a day 2?
Day 1, I usually end up around level 9, maybe level 8 ish. Day 2, well, like I said, I sometimes find myself at level 13, and with just a couple of quests that I've forgotten or have set aside. I usually end day 2 within striking distance of finishing, which is, I guess how you would describe a comfortable day 3, right? So yeah, day 1 usually ends up around level 9, which is maybe a little lower than I'd like to be. I understand the main the big strat that we're all going for is Grops at the moment, and I've not really got into the habit of doing the big rush to level 12 to get those early on in the run. So maybe that's something that I could look at.
I think. Sorry, go ahead, Asa.
Yeah, I gotta ask about this run log right off the bat. What's up with doing the Gourd quest at the end? Was that for stats?
No, that wasn't. Well, yes, it was, but that wasn't the Gourd quest. That was a bounty. I think I'd made. I don't remember actually doing that, but what would have happened was I'd made it to the end, made it to day 3. I realized that I had plenty of adventures, and I just needed to get to level 13. And I thought, well, I may as well do these bounties to because I'm not doing anything else. I'm not trying to make turn count or anything. So I had a bounty, and I did that. It was you can see a couple of turns later. I gained a level there, so it was just getting the last few stats till level 13. If it was a competitive run or anything like that, I wouldn't have been doing that kind of thing. But because it was day 3 and I had plenty of turns left, that was how I chose to power level, as it were.
Okay. I just had to make sure that wasn't like a strategy that you thought was a brilliant strategy. That's pretty bad.
You can basically discount everything after the war, probably, as just dicking around.
So, what do you feel like you have most trouble with in a run? Is it your turn gen? Is it your routing? Is it your leveling? What's going on there?
It's hard for me to say exactly what I have trouble with. If I had to pick something, it probably would be sequencing. As I say, I do know a lot about the mechanics of the game, more than the average player, I would think. But it's difficult to apply that when you haven't got a plan. And as I said earlier, I'm not interested in making a plan for an average run. So I do end up, going down these lines that I realize maybe halfway through or after I've done that that wasn't maybe the most optimal way to sequence things. Yeah.
Okay. One comment I want to make before we start getting into this is that, the green ops soldier stuff, as much as that's great for saving turns, it's A, fiddly, and B, I wouldn't really recommend that for people who are not really trying to save as many turns as they can, because there are just more reliable options to get on to turn count. So, for example, as far as I can tell, some of these things I bring up today, some of them might be because how the run log looks in a weird. It looks weird in a certain way because there's a bug or something like that. Because there's some stuff which I think, for example, you seem to stop using disintegrates after day 1, I think, which is, or is that, does that sound correct?
That might be correct. I'm also not really sure which disintegrate targets I should be having, but for this particular run, I'm not sure if it's right or not.
So we'll just assume that the run log is accurate, and so it
there's a lot of errors that I can see. Obviously, the big blocks where it says I have no familiar are wrong, but yeah.
Okay.
We can assume beyond that kind of thing where it's obviously where it says that I had no familiar, but it was dropping X's and O's. I was obviously running the exoskeleton.
Which is one point I'd like to make, is that you run the exoskeleton for something like 400 combats, I believe. It's here at the bottom. It's 362 combats. So, I mean, it appears to me that once the bridge has dropped, you're running the exoskeleton because A, it's big and fat, and B, it's convenient to just run the exoskeleton. Yeah,
that'd be pretty much. In more recent runs, I've been using the Nat for the same time to get the bacon and the various things from that, and it also is an item familiar, so it serves much the same purpose, despite being slightly less leveled by that point. But that was the suggestion in your notes, I think.
Yeah.
To run the
So-
yes.
Obviously, we have to run the skeleton for 205 combats. I think that is. Oh no. No, it's less than that.
199.
Yeah, 199.
199, sorry. Yeah. 199 combats, which when you've got a turn count of around, let's say sub 400, that starts to get a little bit fiddly. And I understand, and that's an annoying part as well for standard, is the fiddliness, because you want to get your, for example, nat stuff in, but at the same time you want to get your skeleton stuff in. But I think we'd be aiming for something like a 2,500, something like that, or a 2,450. I think is well within your ability, given your game knowledge, and also given your skill set. And obviously there are just a few things that you have to remember, like like we said before, like wishes and digitizers and stuff like that. But we'll get onto that. So what I would say to you is, first of all, you want to be running the skeleton. That's good, as you've been doing, because you have to get 199 combats, and also it unlocks the whole level 9 quest area, which is another 25 turns or something like that of stuff to do. So that's good. One thing that is interesting for me, though, is that you don't run much of the space jellyfish.
Yes, so that's and when I said Green Ops soldiers earlier, like that's part of that. That I haven't really internalized how to use the jellyfish properly. So typically I will run it in the for the special combat in the hole in the sky, the special non-combat, I should say. But I don't really have a great handle on when to best use it for just extracting the jelly and for just general use. So that's definitely something that I could improve.
Dictator, what do you have to say about the space jelly usage?
I would say general use for a space jellyfish is literally all about what jellies can extract where. And for standard runs, especially if you're being a bit lazy, only two really matter. Spooky jellies to force drops out, which are handy because you don't need to disintegrate them, and that means you can do them close to a disintegrate you just used, for example. And stench jellies to force non-combat, because I counted a while back, there's like 50 something non-combat you have to find over the course of a run. So any of those that you can guarantee in a one turn are gonna save turns.
Yeah.
So if you want to use the stench jellies effectively, the only way that would be difficult in sort of a laid back run is that you have been doing the war pretty much as the last thing, and usually most of your stench jellies end up coming from the frat war. So if you could like just level up a little bit faster, I would say the easiest thing to do is hold off on finishing the level 10 quest, the Giants quest, because I don't remember the last time I have done the Giants top floor without using stench jellies. That saves a lot of turn.
Yeah. If we look at the spreadsheet, if you scroll, so we have the Dryhad run tab, and if we scroll down to the bottom, there are some numbers and zones, and then I have some highlighted in red, and these are some of the ones that I think we could definitely save a bunch of turns. But if we scroll down a little bit, we'll see that the castle in the clouds in the sky, the ground floor, you spent 19 turns there looking for that non-combat, and on top of that, another 10 turns looking for the non-combat in the top floor. Now, if you had a stench jelly, that's essentially knocking off 27 turns. And
Yeah, you still need to burn the delay in the ground floor, but yes.
yeah, the ground, obviously the ground floor. It's the basement, isn't it? The ground floor. Excuse me. So the ground floor is
Ground floor was looking for the would have been looking for the boning knife.
Yeah, excuse me. I meant to say, so 4 turns in the basement. I mean, that's decent enough luck actually, because it's a 5% chance that it comes up plus whatever your non-combat bonus is. I assume 25 to 30, something like that.
Yes.
However, 19 turns so 10 turns in the top floor.
I think it might actually be only 3 turns in the basement, because the log itself says I got the Fast and the Furious twice, when that would have been the free run, and then equipping the umbrella.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, it might also count turns spent in the non-combat redirecting, for example. I've noticed it in one of my logs.
Yeah, so that's not actually and it says in the turn count, it says that's 258. So that is only 3 actual turns there in the basement. Not that changes your point.
C Penny, just to butt in there. C Penny says that she's loving all the plethora of accents we all have. So, just to comment on this ground floor, so you were looking for the boning knife, which, I mean, that's fine. But are you making sure that you're looking for that after you have beaten is it the wall of meat?
Yes. So if you scroll right up from your count of the locations, you can see it's right there at the end, right after Tower Level 2. And I just got kind of poor luck having to spend 9 turns there. I think that's the longest I've ever had to spend in the ground floor looking for the boning knife.
Yeah. So there's some bad luck there, and there's not much you can do about that. But we can definitely shave what looks to be I think around 9 turns in the top floor and possibly another 3 turns in the basement. But that basement look is actually on the better scale of things, as in you can sometimes spend upwards of how long is the pity adventure in that zone? Does anybody know offhand? Is it 10 turns?
I thought it was 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awfully long.
Yeah. So even if you're, let's say, only getting a couple of jellies in a run, that's at least let's say 5 to even 9 turns saved in the castle top floor. Now, your argument might be, oh, but I need the hole in the sky open because I need to make my star key. But that's why I have my suggestion that we can actually skip the whole hole in the sky with either 1 wish or 2 wishes. Now, if you're running the Nat, I would recommend that you only go for 1 summon. In our recent run plans, that's Dictator and me, we've actually started to. We used to try and get 2 Nat summons, so 1 on day 1 for the machete, the machete, and then 1 on day 2 for the star chart. But we've actually opted to go just for the star chart now. And I would recommend for you to also do that. So when you're not running your exoskeleton, to run your Nat, to try and get the stuff and the bacon as well, to try and get a level 12 summon, which would give you the star chart for free. Now, if you get the star chart for free, that means you don't ever have to set foot in the in the hole in the sky, and it also means you don't need to find the non-combat in the top floor, and it also means you don't need to rush the top floor. You can basically do the top floor last thing before you go to the sorcerer's tower. So how do you get the stars and the lines? Well, luckily there are 2 monsters which drop 2 stars and 2 lines each, and those are, of course, the skin flute and the
Camel's toe.
camel toe. Yeah. So that's one of my suggestions. I've got a bunch of suggestions actually here on the tab called Dryhad Notes, and I've got what you've done on the left-hand side from what I could gather from the run. Some things are not entirely accurate because of the run logger has improved a little bit since then, but on the right-hand side, we've got my suggestion. So I guess we'll go into wishes first. Does anyone have any major comments?
Yeah, but I think if we just go through like Genie Wishes and Digitize, that's going to cover probably the zones that really need to be fixed.
Okay. So what you've wished on day one, you've wished for a desk, a mountain man, and then interestingly a gaudy pirate. What was your thought process for the gaudy pirate?
That was I think it was kind of an experimental move. I don't usually do that. It might have been that it was getting close to rollover, and I was looking around for something quick to digitize before I ran out of time. But yeah, it would have been something that I figured that I needed eventually, and just to get it out of the way right now. Yeah, I can see why you flagged that though. That it is a bit weird.
The Gaudy Pirate is not necessarily a bad wish, I think, but it's not one I would put in the top 6. And if you're looking to 2-day runs, then you only have 6.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with Dick there. So I think the desk wish is obviously a huge staple for runs right now, but the other wishes and the other digitizers actually kind of pivot on how many turns you expect to play on day one, because so for example in one suggestion I've got you wish for a desk and then you digitize that, which takes you up to turn 97, because if you digitize on turn 1, then it will take up to turn 97 to get your 5th desk. And then I've suggested that after that you go for a bishop digitize. Now, the reason why I've put a bishop digitize is that because I've noticed that you're drinking hacked Gibsons, which is fine, but you're actually spending a bunch of turns in the pantry to collect, I think you're collecting, is it the asparagus to cook food?
No, that was no. That's at the end of the run, and it was for it was just birding turns. If that ignore the pantry, it doesn't.
Okay.
It's not actually part of the run proper. So my food diet day one might be a little bit hacked together, but it wasn't asparagus. It would be
devil hair pastas and spaghetti.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, that's basically whatever I can find. So if I get a Hellion cube, that's obviously going to be Hell ramen. But sauce pasta is the typical thing to go to with a bunch of different options there. And I see the wisdom there in switching to the browser cookies to replace that and substituting it with the Sacramento wine.
And you know the trick about you can essentially get 5 source consumables crammed in one day if you want, using the time spinner.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so if you get, this isn't what I do, but you can make just one single browser cookie and then dupe it twice with time spinner, and that'll take up almost your entire stomach. So that's a good way to fill your stomach with almost all epic food.
Yeah, that is another thing that I need to get into the habit of doing is using my my time spinner, because you might notice that I've got at the end of each day summoning a tea Earl Grey hot, which is when I suddenly remember that I have a time spinner and I figure I should use it for something.
Yeah, we've all been in that situation where we're like, oh, I've still got this resource left. I'll just kind of, brush that under the carpet, use it the best I can do.
Yeah,
but
do something with it today. Yeah.
I think because you're so close to 2-day runs, if you could just push your turn gen up, like another 30 turns per day, like that's pretty much more than you need just off the bat. So, like A Santa just said, if you time spin, for example, the browser cookie, so that means you only need to make one browser cookie, and then you time spin the other two. You can, for example, eat a fortune cookie, a meteorio, and some other, maybe another fortune cookie. Some other miscellaneous one organ food, and then that's your stomach done. Then you've got a hacked Gibson, as well as a hacked Gibson for your nightcap, and then you're going to get a bunch of Sacramento wines. I'm not sure what else I'll just have a quick look what else you drink here, but
it would be possibly the martinis from the KGB. Would be a big part of that, and random other one liver epic booze. It's the usual go-to.
I definitely recommend picking up the martinis, because that's, I think on average it's like 13 clicks to get your splendid martinis, and then you can just pretty much use your other clicks to swap between monster level combat and non-combat or whatever else. So that should be a good use of your KGB right there.
Yeah, I think I feel pretty happy with how I'm using the KGB. The only thing I think I could improve there would be getting the plus or minus combat in the right sequence, because I sometimes find myself having just changed it and realize that I'm going to need to change it back in a couple of turns. So yeah, there's a sequencing issue there, but apart from that, no, I feel pretty good about how I'm using my KGB.
Excellent. So let's.
Another thing to consider: if you do manage to break into 2-day runs, I found that when I broke that barrier, suddenly my diet plans became a lot easier, because your astral consumables fill up a comparatively larger part of your total organ space.
Mm-hmm.
So you might consider grabbing astral pilsners in this case, because it's still your liver that needs a lot of filling. And then whatever bishop juice, we're calling it that now, whatever bishop juice you can't fit in day one, you can just put in your liver day 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So right now, which astral item are we taking?
I go back and forth for this run. It would have been hot dogs, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he ate 3 hot dogs on day 2. Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of hot dogs lately. I don't know if that's the best thing I could be doing, but yeah, that's what I've been doing lately.
It's I think if you're going for this time spinnering browser sort of stuff, I think you should definitely go for the Pilsners, because it's 66 turns for 6 organ space. It's pretty dang good, and moreover, I feel like, yeah, you do need stats, but at the same time, because you've got all these free fights, which we'll probably discuss a bit later, I think you can comfortably make level 10 on day 1, and then probably comfortably make level 12 early enough on day 2 that you don't really need to think about leveling too much, I think. That's my stance. I think you might even finish day 1 on level 11.5, something like that, maybe even 12. if we're assuming you're getting level 10 shortly after finishing all your free fights, which is definitely possible with all the stuff that we actually have now. But I'm sure we'll talk about that in slightly later. So, in terms of wishes, like I said, the desk, that's fine. But then my next suggestion is that because you've got 19 turns spent in the 8-bit zone, which next year might be a thing, but this year we have the Ghost Summon, which can save you...
And the Foundry.
Sorry?
And
oh, yeah,
Foundry.
Of course, and the Foundry. Now, the Ghost is obviously 5 white pixels per Ghost, and then the Foundry is 10 pixels for one bass clarinet. I think typically you'd want to take... I guess it depends on what class you're playing what class you're playing for the run. But let's say you're playing a muscle class, you can take the hatchet on day 1, which will push you over the limit for your bridge parts, because approximately 15 from the pirate bridge. What's it called? The abridged dictionary. There we go. The abridged dictionary. 15-ish from the bridge truss, and then 5 to put you over to get the full 30-30 for the.
Yes,
the
and I
from...
believe that is what I did this run. I did take the hatchet day 1. I might have been slightly misled by the fact that I was a muscle class and was therefore reluctant to go for the bass clarinet. That's usually what I do, and I try to avoid the 8-bit realm as much as possible. And yeah, digitizing a Ghost is something that I've only recently, like after this run, started to try out, and has certainly I certainly see the wisdom in that now. But usually before this run it would have been bass clarinet, and I think the only reason I wouldn't have done it here was because I was a seal clubber, and I was thinking, I don't really want a ranged weapon, but that might just be completely wrong.
Well, I was going to say we just got a new I want to say Kid Fight Club. What's it called? Boxing Day.
Boxing Daycare.
Right. So that gives you, if you want, a 200% buff for your main stat right off the bat. So I would think with that, I still like always taking Fish Hatchet day 1, but if you're worried about combat on day 2, just you could just figure, well, I'll use that whenever I need to make combat easy.
Yeah, because like I said, you desk summon on turn 1, digitize, and then after your 5th desk you'll be on turn 97, and then immediately genie summon a ghost, digitize that, and then by turn 155 you'll have 20 white pixels, at which point you only need 10 more, which could be the bass clarinet from day 2. Mm-hmm. And after that ghost summon, if you know exactly how many turns you're going to play on day 1, you could even go for the bishop. The Witchess Bishop is your second digitize, to make sure that you have enough liver stuff to drink for that day. But if you are sure that you can fit that ghost in, like you can make 155 turns and not have to worry about turn generation for the rest of the day, you could even do the ghost, like I said, second digitize, and then finish off with the bishop on day 1. That's honestly what I would do. Other suggestions are that you actually, if you're going for a really short day 1, which I think here is not the best option, you could even digitize the desk twice to make sure that you have the second floor open nice and early. But like I said, I don't think that's the best course of action here. Mm-hmm. And then my other suggestion is a desk summon into 2 bishop summons. So we actually postpone the ghost until day 2. So we make sure we've got lots of lots of Sacramento wine, or bishop juice as we like to affectionately call it now. lots of sacramental wine for A, day 1, and B, also for day 2. Now, obviously that's just completely your choice. I think if you can, the best to do would be the desk into the ghost, into the bishop. Personally, I think. Because then you can pretty much stop day 1 whenever you want, because it doesn't matter. You're not forced to look for more bishops than what you think is necessary or whatever. But obviously that depends on how many turns you want to play on day 1, and also whether you, for example, have enough turn gen to fit all that stuff in. But those are my suggestions. Does any thoughts from anybody else?
I think when I first started, I don't think it's a terrible plan to double digitize the desks. I know if you have trouble leveling up, it's really nice to get the second floor Spooky Raven, because you can spend a lot of turns there. So I wouldn't be opposed to double digitizing the desk, and then do the ghost or the bishop, and then whichever one you don't do, you could maybe start on day 2.
Yeah, the downside of that is that we're basically trying to turn bloat our way into a day 2 run, which does not play very nicely with double digitized desk, because that means that your last digitize will run very long, which means you don't get all that many copies out of it.
Mm-hmm. I think if you are playing 200, let's call it 250-ish. So let's assume that we want to hit 2 days, 500 turns, which I think is what we should aim for as a kind of at this point. And then I think you could get down to 450, something like that. But I mean, that comes later. The first part is hitting the 2 days, right?
Yeah.
So on day 1, we'll be spending. Usually day 2 is a little bit longer than day 1 in my experience, because you've got a few more resources left to you, and also for example the Grue egg omelette, which I saw that you do get, which is good. But let's say we're playing at least 200, 220 turns on day 1. Like I said, after your desk and ghost summon, you'd be at turn 155, or you do the desk into the bishop. Let's say bishop 2 times to be safe, maybe, which would take you to, I believe, turn 129
or so.
Yeah, 129, something like that. And then you only have to get your 4 copies of your ghost in, or if you want to go over that, let's say you don't want to take a bass clarinet for whatever reason, you can leave the ghost running or whatever, for example. So that would be my suggestion. And then for your wishes, you're also wishing the Mountain Man, that's good, that's fine. Are you using the cat for that?
I am, and that's that block of no familiars, which the log has decided the cat doesn't exist. So it's a bit weirdly laid out. It says that I had the exoskeleton on the Mountain Man, which is wrong. It said I had no familiar before that, which is wrong. But yeah, I disintegrated the Mountain Man and then heisted the last ore that I needed, which is a fairly typical strategy that I've been doing in recent runs. I think ever since the cat was released, I'd tried to do that.
Yeah, that's good. And one thing I like to do, which I've been doing pretty much every run, is that when you do, typically I'm doing the never-ending party quite early in run, and you have a nice 9 amount of combats there for a decent amount of meat. I like to run the cat for those 9 combats, because it gives you 9 progress to your 10 for the heist, and also you're getting more meat at the same time. There's not really a much better place to run it apart from the nuns, so I recommend doing that. So in the never-ending party, running the cat. Make sure that later on, when you want to wish for the Mountain Man, that you can do so. I would not recommend, in your plan, you do wish for the Mountain Man later. I think it's once you're yellow ray timer is up. So your
Yes.
first the run log, according
That's
to the
the
run
frat.
log, you yellow ray something in the spooky forest, which I am going to assume is wrong.
That is wrong. Yeah, I numberologied a frat warrior and
Yeah.
disintegrated that. So that's and it looks like it just
You got the drops, but
yeah,
not the fight.
the run interpreted that as being part of a combat with the bar in the spooky forest, so it just kind of merged it together. But yes, you can see from the drops that Barskin, O, bottle of sake, distressed denim pants, beer helmet, bejeweled pledge pin. Like I obviously disintegrated a frat warrior there.
Okay, good. Disintegrating the frat warrior, that's good. That's completely fine. The problem is that you're not hitting level 12 until way later. So essentially, hitting that frat warrior is not helping you immediately. If you catch my drift.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that it's a bad idea, it's that you don't need to do it so soon, because I feel like a much better early yellow ray option is the bean bat, because you need the enchanted bean, and you also need the sonar, which is a 10% drop. So a yellow ray basically gets you both of those, and it also allows you to pretty much use it. I think it's around turn 3 you can get it done, because turn 1 desk, turn 2 clover, turn 3 the bean bat. I think that's a good consideration for you. And then for later on in the day, the mountain man, and then possibly, what does that take us up to? And then like turn 200 and something, like 210, 205, something like that. You could even you could numberologize the frat warrior.
Yeah.
And then on day 2, let's assume that you start the war quite soonish or whatever. You have 2 options actually. If you're starting the war on day 1, I'd recommend picking up a spooky jelly from one of the many Kerpt warriors that we fight in day 1, for example. So a spooky jelly allows you to get all the drops from the war hippie as you're trying to start the war. Now, this doesn't matter if you're starting the war on day 2, because on day 2 you can just obviously have your disintegrate back up, and you can just disintegrate whatever war hippie you get whilst you're starting the war, for example. And you can also run your jellyfish for that stench jelly whilst you're starting the war as well. But obviously this depends on timings for when you're starting the war and when you're level 12 and such. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, but I think trying to aim for level 12 off of the day 2 free fights is a good and easily achievable goal with all the fights we have these days.
Yeah. So before we start talking about day 2 wishes and digitizers, I think I want to talk about your free fights. Now, as far as I can tell, your free fights seem to be a little bit disjointed and kind of, you've got a bunch like, let's see here, you've got the Never-Ending Party around turn 40, you've got your Snow Joe, I think it's like a turn 144, you've got your Love Tunnel around 168. I assume this is still day 1 because you don't drink until later on, which looks to be the end of your day 1.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a color change.
I think
On this sheet.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's color coded. That's roughly correct. Yeah, that's right. The line between day 1 and day 2 is at 197, and you can see my Nightcap Gibson followed by the first snowman of day 2 there.
Yeah. So some people might not actually be too sure why is it that we do all our free fights like in sequence, and the real big reason is that you can run buffs and not lose them. You can run plus substat plus flat substat buffs, and you can have them for the whole. I think it's like I think I counted it before. It's like 27 free fights we have at the minute, or it might even be 35.
37.
I can't remember. Oh, 37. Okay, so for the 37 free fights, you've got a buff. You've got your buffs that are not going down during those fights. So, the route for what I would suggest for you is that on turn 0 you use your Bastille, which is, I know, probably what you're already doing. You then you summon your desk with the genie and get that digitized, and then the next turn after that, you want to use your clover in the Guano Junction to get your sonars, and then you have two options here. You start to do your free fights here, or you do some shore. So open up the beach and go to the shore. Now this is optional. The merit of doing the shore now is because then you don't waste buff turns using the shore. Because you have to do those shore turns, and obviously they're like, it's at least nine turns in the early part, and then a total of later on 15 turns with the documents and the compass. But those 9 turns are what for when you want to open up the island. Now,
yeah, I have a couple of questions if you about this, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now that the voting monsters are a consideration, which obviously they weren't in this particular run, does that tilt the balance away from the shore there, because you're forced into spending turns in
I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Chunks of 3 when you might have a wanderer due at an inconvenient time with that, or is that not really worth thinking about?
It does not. Yeah, it doesn't really matter, because you have those 3 vote wanderers that you can call up like every 11th turn, and if you're playing 200 turns, you're gonna find some time to put them in some delay zone somewhere along the way. You don't have to do that in the first like 5 or 10 turns.
Okay, the other question I had was where does the love tunnel come into this? Because I've been usually trying to get the percentage stat item before like running my free fights and getting the things like the Bastille block of stats. Is that wrong?
Yeah, Love Tunnel is usually, for me, it's the first free fights that I do. Maybe, well, sometimes I do God Lobster first, but I usually do Love Tunnels as my first main free fight.
If we're looking to go absolutely as pedal to the metal sort of level as much as we possibly can, which I think we should be doing here. The optimal. So after you've done your guano clover, for example, and we jump into our free fights, we would first of all do God Lobster number 1. I'm going to write this down on the thing. I've written this down on Reddit before, but I'll go through it again.
Just link the Reddit post already.
Link the Reddit post. Do you have that handy, Dictator?
Oh, yes.
So it's God Lobster 1 into God Lobster 2. The reason we do those first is because the God Lobster gives that +10 substat buff thing, and the reason why that's better than the love. So is that in the podcast chat?
That's in the podcast
Excellent.
chat.
The reason we do that first is because Love Tunnel it gives +10 substats as well, but it takes you 3. It takes 3 combats. Well, I think it ties with that actually, doesn't it? Because you get it after the second combat in Love Tunnel, and then you fight the third with that +10, and then you go to the God Lobster. So you could actually do. It doesn't matter which one you do first, essentially, out of Love Tunnel and God Lobster, because at this point you want to be running your garbage shirt to double your stats. And so, sorry. So let's go back to the beginning. So let's assume we're going for God Lobster first. we buff our main stat to as high as we possibly can without using, resources we don't want to, that cost turns to make, for example, or resources that we're going to use later on in the day.
Have some other side benefit that you want to be using later in the day, yes.
So God Lobster 1, God Lobster 2, with that equipment you just got equipped to get the plus stats. And then what I like to do, because it's 3 combats in the Love Tunnel, I like to go to the NEP. No, I'm screwing this up. Our first combat is the Rook, isn't it? Not the God Lobster.
Well, I mean, this is where it's kind of depends on how obsessive you want to be. You can try to get it exactly the right way, or just sort of come close to the right way and still get almost the same amount of stats. So yeah, I would do the Rook after Love Tunnel, but if you're low on meat and you want to spend a couple turns at NEP first, that's fine.
Yeah. So
if you're doing a Rook, you should do it first, but you can totally just not do it and get yourself another consumable.
Yeah, I think
if you feel like playing a little lazy.
Yeah, I mean it is a bunch of monster. I'm not sure how much monster level you're running typically in a run, and whether you feel you could comfortably run more. Sorry, that was a question. I might not have phrased that very well.
How much?
So how much monster level do you find yourself running typically?
It depends. But usually about I'll have the cowboy boots and the radio running, and maybe 10 or so more than that from miscellaneous other things, I would say. So that would be about 20, about 30 to 40.
And how comfortable is that for you? Like, is that completely fine to run that much monster level?
Yeah, that's typically that's manageable.
Do you think that you could manage, let's say, double that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So one of the things that I do have trouble with is the bits where the bits like the typical tavern and the ghouls, where you do have to run a lot of monster level. I do find that difficult to manage sometimes, especially on muscle classes. So yeah, I'm not sure how I would deal with the generally running 70, 80 monster level for the whole run.
With your skill set, as long as we're under 150 monster level, I feel like we can just use Curse of Weak Source, Micro Meteorite, what else?
And a fish hatchet to the face. I think that's already
either fish hatchet to the face or time spin. Like, we can basically stall for as long as possible for free. So like time spinner is another 3D level. I mean, and then a lunging thrust smack or a shield butt or whatever you want to do is pretty much going to one shot whatever you're fighting.
Yep.
And that's running 150 monster level, which is essentially 3.5 times what you're already running now, which is going to be a huge amount of stats for you over the course of a run.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying to you like, next run pile on 150 monster level and figure it out. I'm saying next run maybe try running, for example, what's it called?
Pride of the Puffin.
Urkels, for example, but the Puffin buff.
Pride of the
Puffin.
Yeah.
There we go. Pride of the Puffin, and also Drescher's favourite noise, which is that's going to be like another 30-ish monster level. Like, whenever you're running monster level, only run monster level a little bit at a time, because a turn where you die because of monster level is a turn. I mean, a turn lost essentially, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, that's the difficulty that I'm running. Like running those buffs that's something that is relatively low cost that I could do. But yeah, if it does end up being that is the tipping point where I'm either getting beaten up in one of those combats, or I'm spending a lot of resources to not get beaten up. Then I've still got those buffs to deal with for another 9 or 19 turns. Right?
Yeah. So a little bit at a time, and you'll be surprised how much monster level you can actually safely manage. Especially if you're running, for example, like your DA buffs, like Ghostly Shell, Astral Shell, Shield of the Pastamancer, like that sort of stuff, survival skills. In a typical Bleeding Edge standard run, we're running 300 monster level from around as soon as we're running our free fights, essentially, and we don't even really come close to dying ever because of all the stuff that we can pretty much one shot everything after like a couple of turns of stasis, something like that. So,
except for the stupid love enemies, they're annoying.
The love they have like that physical and elemental resistance, and then the first one is even more resistant to weapon attacks or something, and then the second one is resistant to spells. Awful.
Those are also, though, in some ways, a pretty low risk on that axis, because losing to them, you only miss out on the substats they would have given you. You don't actually lose a turn.
Yeah. Luckily,
you don't even get beaten up.
Yeah. Luckily, I can't remember. Was it Somersault or Astronaut guy who we hate? One of those.
In this case, Somersault.
Okay, one of those two completely discreet and independent people who ruined everybody's free fights. Luckily they didn't manage to ruin the free fights in the love tunnel, because they, like you said, you don't lose turns, so you can die happily in the love tunnel if you do so choose.
He added 3 turns to my DP runs.
Right. So go back to the free fights. What I would recommend is that you, let's say we're skipping Rook because we're not sure we're comfortable with the Rook, with the monster level that the Rook adds to your free fights, for example. Are you taking the Witchess? Are you taking a Witchess boss on in your runs?
No.
I do. How would you feel about? Okay, we'll come back to that. Let's say we're not feeling comfortable to do that right off the bat. If you are feeling,
it's more that I just never really learned what the strategy was with those. So like I've just never I've never really internalized the idea of fighting the Witchess bosses, and I feel a bit uncomfortable with all their various complications in those fights. But yeah, that's more that I haven't actually looked into it a whole lot than I don't feel like I actually could do it.
There used to be a strategy, and now that strategy's gone, because you basically go to the NEP, get yourself a jam band flyer, and then laugh at anything that even tries to hurt you afterwards, and then you like hit them once, and then they die.
All right then.
But
I mean, in the case of the Witch's bosses, you hit them like 10 times and they die, but they deal no damage anymore. So it's fine.
So what I would suggest to you is you go for the God Lobster number 2 for the plus substat buff, and then go for the Love Tunnel, taking the main stat, obviously the main stat item of your choice, and then the Love Botomy for the plus substats, and then the Enamarang like you're doing. If you're feeling particularly fancy, you can actually take the Toast to make Stench Toast, and then Time Spinner the Stench Toast. But in this case, we're time spinnering the browser cookies, so there's pretty much no point at all to take the toast. So an Amarang is fine. And then straight after that, jump into the never-ending party with your cat. Running like plus meat or whatever. And then once you get to the non-combat choice, you can pick the main stat experience, which for example, in a muscle class is the kitchen with the spice buff, which is plus 20% XP. Get that, and once you've got that, I mean, technically you should stop going to the never-ending party there if you're being particularly optimal, but I mean, it's probably fairly negligible, because the only reason we stopped there is because the NEP fights obviously scale to, I think, 10k is the cap, or some. It might even be 20k. Yeah, 20k. So in theory, if you do your non-scaling fights first, you'll be at a higher main stat than you would be if you did it right then. So that's why we actually leave it at that point. But it's not too important. So after the NEP, you go to the Snow Joe, because the Snow Joe doesn't scale, and you make use of your plus flat substat buffs. After the Snow Joe, you actually want to slot your first ghost in, which obviously depends on what your path is and class and all that sort of stuff. But you essentially want to put your ghost in there because the ghost doesn't scale, and it gives you a few more stats to go to your other scalers. So after you've got your ghost done, that's when you want to be thinking about taking your Witch-S boss, because hopefully you've got either a gas canister, or is it gas can? Is it gas can? It's just gas can, I think.
Just can.
So
yeah.
A, your gas can, or B, your Jamban flyer, which make the Witch-S bosses are pretty much a joke. The Queen can still be a little bit of trouble because she's got like 4k HP or whatever, and you need to do damage. You need to obviously do 4k within 30 rounds, which can possibly be a problem if you've not got enough like damage sources, because she has got that physical and elemental resistance. But
the Queen also has 75% de-level resistance, which is really annoying because it makes your jump at so much less effective.
yeah, but
I found that you kind of want 2 for the Queen.
Yeah, you can funk sling 2 of them if you're lucky or whatever. But I mean, how often are you finding yourself doing Moxie runs, Dryhad?
About a third of the time. Like I've mixed it up.
Okay, so a third of the time. So if you've got yourself a couple of jam bands, you can probably try and go for the Queen. The Queen is an absolute joke with... I think I've never failed against the Queen with a jam band, an electronic kit, and a gas can, because the gas can's doing something like 2k damage alone, and if you use 2 of those, I think that's pretty much killing the Queen on its own. You don't need to bop her a couple of times. I would definitely recommend to pick that up because it's the Witch-S item are obviously 5 main stat per turn. The Witch. You can use items against the. I think I've killed the Witch once.
No, you can't. You can't use combat items against the Witch.
Oh, so the Witch, you can't use combat items.
Right.
I'm not sure what the Witch strategy is, so I'm not really got room to comment there. Maybe one of you two can help out.
I don't know. It's been so long. I mean, basically, you just cast all your de-leveling skills.
And then wait for them to do a job.
And yeah. I assume, I don't remember if we've mentioned this yet, the trick with exoskeleton and the meat mumming thing?
The captain, yeah.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned it in podcast chat.
If you have that mumming outfit on the exo, it takes off, I don't remember what it is. It's a pretty strong D-level. So really between like all your skills and that, it'll de-level the Witch probably enough to kill it.
Yeah. So essentially, if you're feeling like you've got enough combat items or damage or deleveling or whatever to take on a Witch S boss, then do so. After you've killed your Witch S boss, which at this point, and then you can pretty much just do the rest of your scaling stuff. For example, the rest of your Witch S pieces, your last God Lobster fight, which should be the MP buff because it's pretty much free MP for the rest of the run. So the Witch S people, the tentacles, which can be a bit of a problem, but I think should be fine for you. You can just cast Source Storm. That usually kills them within, like, cast Curse of Weak Source, cast Source Storm over and over again. They should die before they kill you. And then after all those free fights, if you do it in that kind of order, and you don't die, hopefully, I'd imagine you'd be level 9.5 straight off the bat, like at least. It's even better now that we have the boxing buff, which is plus 200% main stat, because obviously main stat helps you with how much stats the monsters give. So,
and it also helps a lot for the monster level buffs that you're running for the first 100 turns.
Mm-hmm. So I'd imagine level 9.5 or so right off the bat is easy enough to do for your free fights if you do them all at once, like we've suggested. If you don't like the route that we've proposed in terms of like doing this fight first, blah blah blah, that's fine. As long as you're doing all your free fights together, that's the important part, because you want to utilize those buffs, you want to utilize those plus substat stuff. If you start to disjoint your fights, you start losing a lot of efficiency in terms of buffs, like especially those buffs that you can't cast yourself, if that makes sense. Okay, so if we move on to day 2, my suggestions for day 2, the wishes on day 2, like I said, if you're going for the Nats, the kind of Nat summon for the astronomer, for the star chart, you can think about wishing and digitizing a skin flute, which after your wish and then 3 more of that skin flute, you'll have finished your star key without ever having to set foot in the hole in the sky. I've also got the assassin. So I noticed that it took you 12 turns to get the assassin, which is obviously as bad as it can be. Was that just poor luck?
I think it would have been. I don't remember exactly how it went, but it would. Like I typically run all my plus combat there, and if it took that long, it would just have been RNG. I would think it was not.
One nice thing to remember that is that whilst you're getting your hot wings in the Dark Heart, you can run your latte. Sorry, what was that?
He's got I don't know if the log's right, but it looks like 4 of them here for some reason.
Yeah, no digitizing them.
But I mean, there's one on the 4th turn. Am I right?
Yeah.
Would be turn 2.
Oh, that might have been a misclick. so call it 11 turns then. I honestly don't remember. But yeah, it's possible that I just accidentally clicked adventure again after I got my last one, and then happened to run into another assassin.
We can't save you from yourself, Dryhad. We can only give you advice.
I can only That's that's entirely on me if that's what happened, and it's not actually just a log error. But
so I didn't realize. So you've actually, in those 12 turns or 11 turns or whatever, you've actually got all 3 assassins.
Yeah. Okay. So the lesson here is to digitize the assassin, not to just.
Yeah. So in this run, you still would have saved. It looks like 5 turns between the first assassin and the second. You'd save all those turns if you digitized.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 more because you can put the digitized assassins in delay zones.
Well,
Okay.
I think according to like the run log, again this might be an error. You only digitize the lobster frogman on day 2, and then as far as I can tell, you've just given up digitizing stuff for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But it might be an error.
No, I think
Really
that's correct. Yeah, I have very poor digitized discipline. I'm trying to. That is one of the things I'm working on, and I've been working on being more efficient. But with my extra digitizers. But yeah, I haven't quite mastered that. I do tend to give up, especially later in the run, where I'm just like too much, just whatever.
Well, my advice would be, I mean, we're giving you a couple different suggestions for genie targets and digitize.
Yeah.
But I would just like pick one, pick 6 genie targets and 6 digitized targets, and just, figure, okay, for the next couple runs, I'm always going to do these. And the trick that you need to remember that I forget sometimes too is, as soon as you get the last monster, the last digitized monster, you immediately think, okay, what's my next one going to be? 'Cause that's what I want to go find.
So far, it looks like we've got desk, then in brackets ghost. So desk is your definite first target, and then if you need that turn gen before the end of the day, the bishop, and then you can possibly end on the assassin after you've disintegrated your mountain man. So you'd be finishing day 1 after a bunch of bishop after a bunch of bishop wanderers, and then finish your day 2 after your third assassin. Sorry, your day 1 after your third assassin. So that's your day 1 done. And then the next day you'd wish up a ghost, for example, digitize the ghost, and then once your ghost is done, digitize the flute, and then once your flute is done, go back to your bishop summon, because you can't if you have your last digitize as a witch chess piece, which are obviously free fights, you can't really lose turns from them, because even if like you've got nowhere to put them at that point, they're not going to cost you a turn. So yeah, they're not hurting you is what I'm trying to say. Oh gosh. So that's my suggestion there. But make sure you know what you're digitizing. I'm not saying to make, like a spreadsheet and have it planned out. This turn is this happens and blah blah blah. Like for example, I do. But just keep in mind, on like a notepad. Oh, I'm digitizing this, and then digitize this or this depending on what I need. So something very simple like that.
Yeah, that is the kind of thing that I could just get into the habit of doing. Although with digitize going away pretty soon.
Yeah, it's like 3 weeks more of it. So.
Yeah, so I've got to.
Since we've been spending a lot of time on strategies that are going to go out of standard soon, I do want to mention one thing that you should probably learn to do well. I just looked at your run log, and I see you have a grand total of 1 spring-loaded bumper, which is the Aston banished. Again, this sort of depends on how obsessive you want to be. I wouldn't worry too much about constantly using Aston banishes, but that's something that'll save, like, you can easily save 10 turns off a run if you just sort of remember to always keep your Aston Martin filled, and that is going to help you banish a lot of monsters. Because like you do have a lot of zones that are just maybe like 2 or 3 turns over what they could be. So just having access to more banishes, I think, is kind of a big deal.
If you use Guide, Guide actually reminds you when you can use your Asden.
Yeah.
Asden banish again. It actually pops up right at the top, which is quite handy. And like, if you're not using it every 30 turns, that's fine. I mean, it costs me, and it's also something to remember, especially if you just want to kind of like, get through your turns within an hour or 2 in a day.
Yeah, it does seem like using it all the time would be extremely fiddly, and that's kind of how I interpret what Guide is telling me, right? So I see it pop up like, okay, like, yes, if I was being totally optimal, I would be able to sequence my run in such a way that every 30 turns I'd be finding something to banish or whatever. But I'm not being completely optimal, therefore I can ignore this, and that's the bad habit that I've gotten into with regard to that.
Instead of taking it as I should banish something now, take it as I should refuel my Aston Martin so that he has fuel when I run into a monster that I don't want to see next time.
Yeah, okay.
I think this becomes a lot easier if you have a look in useful chat macros on the Discord. I've got a macro roundabout at the bottom of my macros, which is at the very top of the list. The bottom one is a macro to cook one soda bread and add it to the carb car. So you basically type in chat and it does it all for you, and you can change this to say, I think 10 soda breads, it's like 9 or 10 is enough for you to get a banish, to fuel the spring-loaded bumper banish, whatever it's called. So you basically type in chat, and the chat macro does it for you, and then you've not even had to fiddle around making stuff. It's done it all for you, which might reduce a bit of the fiddle for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll copy that in podcast chat.
Yeah, I see that.
Here we go. Like I said, you can change the number from 1 to whatever number you want. I think 10, like I said, is for the banish. Which probably brings us on to one of the final kind of general points, which is we have so many banishes now that you basically want to banish most stuff you don't want in those zones where you want a particular monster. For example, the Goatlet. I know that you did it in the niche because you got a minimum turn niche, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I'd even use 1 or 2 in the airship because you want to. 1, it removes delay, and 2, you don't want for example, protagonist. And I mean, the random encounter guy gives you skiers, but at the same time he's a double copy monster, which means he's coming up. I don't want to do the maths. It's not twice as likely. It's like 1.3.
Yeah, 2/3 more likely.
It's just more.
It's more likely. So you can actually banish him because, I mean, obviously you want to. What I generally do is I olfact the quiet healer. Hope that she gives me an amulet and lots of skiers. Remove that olfact after I've got her amulet and let's say a couple of skiers or something like that, and then I olfact the burly sidekick. Hope that he gives me his wig. Failing that, I mean, you kind of come back to that later. But that's the kind of that's the plan that you want to go with is maybe consider a couple of banishes there. Banishes in the hidden city. I noticed you've got an 18-turn hidden bowling, whatever it's called.
That doesn't sound right. 18 turns. Hang on. Let me see what this actually looks like.
That's 18
that sounds.
So a whole lot of those are drunk pygmies which don't actually cost a turn.
Yes, so those weren't. Those weren't actually turns.
You opt for the matchbook.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense. So you are using banishes on, for example, the orderlies.
I didn't banish orderlies. I'm not sure why. I usually do. Yeah, I
a likely story, Dryhad.
I know. Yeah, that's probably just an example of where I should be using the Aston banish, because it was probably that I had run out of smoke bombs and tranquilizer darts.
I would say, I mean, I'm at the point where I literally banish every single monster in Hidden City that I don't want. But I would say at a bare minimum, get in the habit of usually banishing the lawyer, and I would say always save a banish for orderlies.
Yeah. And
And
that is broadly speaking what I try to do. I think in this case I probably had run out of the other banishes, and I didn't think to use the Aston because again I've kind of trained myself badly not to think about that. So yeah, that's what's going on there. Yeah, and the pygmies don't count. They were all just free.
Yeah, and remember that when you banish the orderlies in the bowling alley, it banishes them also from the hospital.
Yep.
And likewise,
the
if you
lawyers
the lawyer,
and the other two.
And
yep.
the janitors in all of them.
So those are really, yeah, the janitors obviously in all of them as well. And you can even banish the janitor with the park adventure whilst you're looking for your machete as well.
Yes.
Yeah, what did I do this run? So
there's a janitor in the hidden park where you picked up the book of matches.
Yes, okay.
So you put them in the park.
Yeah, okay, good. So that seems to be
another point is that you've got an 18 turn middle chamber. Was that a problem with item drop, or was that a problem with banishes again?
I think it would have been with item drop.
So you got a lot of asps in there.
I did get a lot of asps. You could say that it was a problem with both. I suppose, it was. So realistically, yeah. You can also see that I did 3 rats at the end of that. So, even if I had banished the asps and the servant, that would have saved a bunch of turns, and possibly if I'd banished them early, it would have pushed them before the unlocks. So yeah, in that sense, it would have been that. But yeah, I was also struggling to find the ratchets, and I'm trying to think of the specific circumstances here, but it's typically a matter of not getting enough ratchets off my tangles.
So I just want to make a comment, which is on day 2, where you've got the training helmet for 25 item, you've got the sacramental wine for 50, you've got I'm sure by this point you'll have a bunch of O's from the exoskeleton, which is another 50 for the glasses. So that's 125 item drop right there. You've got around 100. How much do we get in passives now? In standard passives, 95. That's another 95. Probably around about another 100 50. From your familiar.
And another 50 in the Aston Martin.
Aston Martin's another 50. And failing all of that somehow, you don't want to think at all or something. You can put your champagne bottle on, and never have to think again about kind of item drop, basically, because that's one of the few places where you actually need, more than 234% item drop. So that's so you could use 2 banishes in there and your champagne bottle, and then you've got a minimum turn middle chamber, using a tangle if you get one, for example, or whatever. That was one point I wanted to make. Another point I want to make is that you don't go to the gauntlet until turn 124, which is not bad in itself. It's just that I like to go to the gauntlet early because 1, it's a nice place to use one of my banishes. 2, for example, an early Aston Martin banish, and 2, you want to have that milk before you eat, obviously, and that's another place you can use your champagne bottle to make sure you've got 400% item drops to get that to make sure that the milk drops to make the milk of magnesium. As long as you're eating before you've got milk, that's completely fine. But that's something to keep in mind. Like an early goatlet is sometimes a good thing. I guess in your case, you weren't getting to level 9 until the end of the day, so that might have been level 8. It's level 8 for the goatlet. So I'm not sure when you were getting to level 8, but that might have been your bottleneck there. Is that
yeah,
possible?
that's and that's actually that's a good segue into the sequencing of my diet, because yes, I do try to get milk before eating, and I also like to be as high a level before eating as possible anyway because of spaghetti breakfast. And yeah, that is a bit of a bottleneck getting to the level to get the goats, although not one that I find particularly onerous. Like maybe if I was to take on the suggestion of the browser cookie based diet and move away from the Gibsons a bit, that might end up showing up. I'm not sure. I'll have to see how that works out. But yeah,
I was just going to say the nice part about the browser and the time spinners is that you still get to use the Gibsons because you only need the one browser cookie, right?
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, to use the Gibsons early on for the extra adventures and the stats from those, and then when I run out of adventures and liver to eat with milk and eat the spaghetti breakfast and whatever else I've scrounged up at that point is the usual plan for stomach.
Yeah, sounds good. One other thing is that you're mostly putting your wanderers in delay zones, which is good. There's a couple points where I think you might have misclicked, but I mean that happens to everybody. But for the most part, you are sticking them in a delay zone, right?
Yep.
That's good. Your boombox, are you just sticking that on meat and pretty much forgetting about it for the rest of the run?
I've been trying to. So I think this particular run, I forgot about it until midway through day one, maybe. I've been trying to really focusing on getting better about that and activating it on turn 0. I've been working on doing food early on and then switching to meat later. But I'm not really sure what the best plan for that is. I'm interested to hear what you guys think.
Well, the best plan is to do neither of those, and it's to get nightmare fuel.
Yep.
I think that's fiddle.
Yeah, I don't. It's up to
yeah.
you if you want to do that.
I think the nightmare fuel, does it save? Is it like 5 turns or something like that? Maybe a bit more.
I think it's possible to get 6, but for most people it would be 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, nightmare fuel actually saves less turns than you get out of the special seasonings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So given that we said earlier that I should be focusing on turn gen to make day count, the food is probably better for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Stick it on the food buff, and then you don't even need to touch it again.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, for the nuns or whatever, or if you're particularly hard for meat, you can swap it a few times throughout the day, and make sure that you're using your sing along with the meat as well, because it gives you that plus extra 25 base. One other thing is that you can actually change to the Geiger, the Eye of the Geiger for the spooky damage when you need the spooky damage for A, the tavern, or B, the level 13 quest. I think it's 13 spooky damage or 12 or something like that.
Yeah, it's equal to your level.
Oh, it's equal to your level. Okay, so that's nice because spooky damage isn't all that too abundant in a run, and it lets you obviously do those tavern non-combat kind of tests. There's just a couple more points I wanted to make. Banishes in Whitey's Grove is another, because you've got a 9-turn Whitey's Grove. There's only 4 monsters there, so 2 banishes and you're pretty much guaranteed to complete it within like 2 to 4 turns or something like that. If you no duplicates, interestingly, or is that wrong?
No, that's right. That's just yeah.
You said that with such conviction.
Yeah. No, I know that that's wrong, and yeah, that's just not something that I've like. I used to duplicate goats. I guess I fell out of the habit. I don't know. I can't remember why I stopped.
That's actually like if you're not doing crazy green up strategies, and if you're effectively using banishes, duplicate is like if you forget about it, it's not a huge deal. Probably just 1 or 2 turns.
It's typically saving like 1, maybe slightly more than 1 turn. So my suggestions there are basically Goatlet and Gaudy, as most plans probably suggest. So, I mean, it's kind of nice. Gaudy can be a pain if you've banished all the goats. I mean, it's saving literally 1 turn. But the problem with Gaudy is that it's in a 7 monster zone, so you can actually get screwed pretty hard, even with all faction. I think Dictator last run managed to not get the Gaudy, or was it Lift? One of you two.
I don't think it was me. I haven't had any stupidly long Gaudy pirates in a while.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Lift,
they can definitely screw you over.
Yeah, Lift sniffed, like super sniffed it, so all faction, Galapagos, and the Latte sniff, and still managed not to get a Gaudy for like 3 turns or something. And there was a run, my run, I completed in hardcore like about a month ago. It took me like 20 turns to find the first Gaudy. I mean, obviously duplicate wouldn't have helped that, but just it's an awful zone. So I don't blame your wish for the Gaudy. However, in this case, I believe there are better wish options.
Yeah, sure.
Given the circumstance. So I think we can probably there's more than enough to go off there. Do you feel like you've learned something, Dryhad, today?
Oh yes, definitely. No, I think that all that stuff about the free fights, particularly, and like that. I mean, that's stuff that obviously is pretty logical and just follows on from a pretty basic understanding of how buffs work. But it's just not something that I'd really given a lot of thought to. Yeah,
understandably so. It's just it's a lot of fiddle. It's a lot of. It's not even.
It's not even all that much fiddle. It's arguably less fiddly than just doing them whenever. To just do all of the things at once. Like that's the kind of thing that I find really valuable for this kind of. I guess you might say lazy run or casual
lazy
speed
practice.
Or whatever, however you want to call it. This kind of run where I'm not trying to make a big plan of every a big spreadsheet of every turn and what I'm trying to do there, but I still do want to do as well as I can. That kind of thing is a really low effort but high reward type of strategy, and so I find that really valuable.
Yeah, and to build on that, if you are leveling like quickly in those first few turns, it will also really help your sequencing, because right now you were like doing the spooky forest because you needed something to do, and then you were spending a whole lot of turns in the bat hole because you needed something to do, and then you finished all the fires because you needed something to do.
Yes, and one of the things
all these zones are places that you can that are really helped by not doing them yet, because you get like maybe some stench jellies or some free runaways or whatever to just skip through these zones really quickly if you wait until later.
Yeah. Yes, and one of the things that I did identify as something that I knew I needed work on was getting that early leveling, because I see a lot of you guys talking about I know that the drops aren't really the strat that I'm looking for here, but getting to level 12 so early in the run was something that just was completely out of my out of my view, and that kind of thing is a good way to get slightly closer to that.
Okay, to wrap up, I'd say one, at least plan your wishes and digitizers out, if nothing else. Two, remember your time spinner. So you want to maximize your epic food consumption. So time spinnering the browser cookie, making sure you've got lots of sacramental wines to drink, taking the pilsners as well to fill up your liver, that sort of thing. Make sure that you're boosting your turn gen as much as you can to make sure that you can push yourself over that those few turns on day 3 that you're spending when they could be day 2 turns and you could be finishing on day 2. Maybe running the jellyfish just a little bit to get those stench jellies, which are going to save huge amounts of turns in the castle particularly. And at that point, you've already got your bridge truss. You've got really nothing better to run on the battlefield, so you may as well run the jellyfish, I feel. Try and get those stench jellies.
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess remembering also, lastly, those banishes. Even if you're not using the Aston Martin every 30 turns, using it every so often. Every time, there's a zone where you particularly need a banish or something would be a good course of action. And similarly, sniffing stuff you want to see with all 3 sniffs that we have. That is latte, that is Galapagos, or as we affectionately call it, turtle sex, and of course olfaction as well. Any other comments from anybody or any questions Dryhad?
No, I think I'm good for I think that's pretty much covers it.
Yeah. Well, in that case, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say you've got about 23 days to do a 2-day hardcore run, and then it gets difficult again.
Yeah, that is the thing. We talked a lot about digitize and to a lesser extent duplicate, and I guess browser cookies and Gibsons as well that are all going away next year. I'll be looking forward to using some of these things in future Boris runs that I need to do to get that sweet. The request sandwich, but and I do still have a couple more softcore runs to do to get the softcore standard outfit for this year, so I can apply some of that, even though a lot of what we've been talking about is hardcore focused.
I know it's Crimbo and you've got other stuff to do, Dryhad, but if I were to put a bounty on a 2-day hardcore run, would that incentivize you to perhaps try?
Gosh.
I'd really love to see you do it.
Look, I'll do these last 2 softcore runs, and then I'll see what my schedule's looking at, and I'll see if the powers that be spring a ridiculously elaborate Crimbo event on us or not in that time. But watch this space. I might. I do want to try a lot of this stuff, and I'll see how. I'll see how much time there is.
Yeah, you can always try it in your softcore runs. I mean, most of this, if not all of it, applies to your softcore runs as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess, thank you very much, A Santa, ho ho ho.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Deck the Halls, Data. Is he still there? Hello?
Yes. It was fun.
Okay.
And hopefully informative for more people than just Dryhad.
Hopefully. We can wish. And of course, thanks to you, Dryhad, the Angels.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody.